Welcome, everyone, again, and thank you for joining us this evening for our celebration of the lovely group of authors and books spotlighted in the new Nonfiction 2025 feature of our September-October magazine issue, which includes some of the year's most heartfelt, striking, and inquisitive memoirs, essay collections, and hybrid nonfiction works. As always, my name is India Lena González, and I'm the features editor of Poets and Writers magazine. Tonight's event will include readings from our debut nonfiction authors, which will be followed by a conversation about their book journeys thus far. Our annual new nonfiction feature, which is now in its 8th year running, almost a decade, highlights 5 stellar debut books, and in this series, we ask our chosen authors to write personal essays sharing stories about the creation of their debuts, taking our readers on their respective literary and publication journeys. Some housekeeping notes to keep top of mind. We kindly ask that our audience members remain muted throughout the entirety of the event so we can fully enjoy the authors without any disruption or background noise. We're doing great thus far. Additionally, please feel free to utilize the chat feature and share any questions you may have for the writers so we can incorporate as many of them as possible at the end when we get to the Q&A. And on that note, we kindly ask that you keep the chat a respectful space for literary conversation. Additionally, please consider becoming a member of Poets and Writers if you aren't already, so we can continue offering programs such as this one and producing even more exciting editorial features. We will provide a link in the chat to our membership page for those of you who are interested. This evening, we have the very real pleasure of hearing from and sharing virtual space with Sara Aziza, author of The Hollow Half, a memoir of bodies and borders, published by Catapult, Erika J. Simpson, author of This Is Your Mother, published by Scribner, Julian Brave NoiseCat, author of We Survived the Night, soon to be released by Knopf in mid-October, Amanda Hess, author of Second Life, Having a Child in the Digital Age, published by Doubleday, and Samina Najmi, author of Sing Me a Circle, Love, Loss, and a Home in Time, soon to be published by Trio House Press the 1st of October. I'm so thrilled to have you all joining us tonight, and congratulations on the publication of your debuts once more. For our audience, because we always have gifts for the audience, we have created a bookshop page, including the titles of all of tonight's authors, should you feel moved to purchase their works and support independent booksellers in the process. That will be shared in the chat, as well as a link to the online feature. As a bonus to the essays that appear in print, exclusive excerpts and readings by our 5 new nonfiction authors can also be found on our website. So please visit the link and enjoy those extra goodies. Now let's get on to the good stuff so that I no longer have to talk. So we're going to kick things off with a reading from Sara Aziza, a Palestinian-American writer, translator, and artist with roots in Ibtis in Deir al-Bala, Gaza. She's the author of The Hollow Half, a genre-bending work of memoir, lyricism, and oral history exploring the intertwined legacies of diaspora, colonialism, and the American dream. Her award-winning journalism, poetry, essays, and experimental nonfiction have appeared in The New Yorker, The Paris Review, Best American Essays, The Baffler, Harper's Magazine, Mizna, The Washington Post, The Guardian, and The Nation, among other publications. Welcome, Sara.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone for being here, and in particular, my fellow authors. Congratulations on your beautiful work. I'm going to jump right in. I'm reading from a bit of a difficult passage, but it feels appropriate considering we're currently witnessing a genocide in Gaza. So I'm going to read a passage that takes place in the 1960s in Gaza. The characters you'll meet are Hurriya, my grandmother, and Ziad, my father. June in Gaza was blazing in 1967, but Hurriya kept her boys inside as armies approached. Hurriya and her neighbor had dug a trench. My father, age 6, did not understand why he was forbidden from the beach. He begged for the water, complaining of the heat. But Hurriya kept her boys inside as armies approached. She and the neighbors had dug a trench, ready if the bombing came too near. Bored, little Ziad crawled around the shaded hole. Looking up, he felt the static in the air, but could not read his mother's eyes. A plane ripped the air above their heads. Eardrums splitting, he cannoned to his mother's lap. Ibrahim, 17, begged his mother to let him fight. By the time she relented, he found only abandoned streets. A bystander approached. "Go home," he said. "The fight is already lost." He added a bitter joke Ibrahim would repeat for 50 years. "We'll drink tea in Tel Aviv tonight." What he meant was, there is no more map of us. Western historians named the conflict the Six-Day War, but for the Arab world, it was a Neksa, the setback. Neksa, the long shadow of Nekba, the cruel younger brother of catastrophe, reminding that there is always more to lose. After 3 days of sheltering in place, they heard the loudspeakers for the first time. Scratchy electronic voices ordered households to hang white flags. It was Ibrahim, the would-be soldier, who hoisted his mother's snowy shawl over the door. When the Zionist soldiers knocked, calling for all men above 14, Hurriya's 2 teenage sons emerged. At each door, the soldiers, young men themselves, shouted at the women to stay back. Blanched sons begged their mothers to comply. Husbands showed steeled backs to trembling daughters and wives. Ziad slipped away, trailed his captive brothers with a cluster of little boys. In an empty square near the sea, he watched guns point, ordering the men's faces to the sand. There are things a body does not unlearn. There is a kind of fear that enters the blood, mingles where we cannot see. And there is pain that lives aloof from language, a deep-sea creature with no eyes. Beneath the skin, it keeps its own memory and time. The soldiers were after not blood, but gold that day. Each pocket was turned out, every wallet confiscated. The captives staggered away without their watches. Bodies returned to them. One more small section that's skipping slightly ahead. Gaza, before the war, had been a way station, ground for the 250,000 refugees who stoked village names like embers, their eyes warm with return. Now, the lines around it hardened, cleaving futures and families. Beyond, parts of Palestine were declared the West Bank, while Arabs in Jerusalem were informed they now lived in Israel. Beyond, Hurriya's husband and oldest son were barred from return. The displaced had become occupied, and it seemed all oxygen had fled. My father fell sick, uneating and unsleeping, after he glimpsed his teacher's corpse. On the eve of the invasion, the man who had taught him to read Jennin lost his mind. 20 years after his first displacement, the sight of Zionist armies was more than he could bear. Wild with loss and rage, he hurled from his front door. His last words, shouted over his begging family, were directed at the troops. "Get away, you swine." The Israelis forbade his burial. The teacher lay in the street for days while his family waited for the army to announce a break in curfew. Even then, they were permitted only to throw shallow soil over the corpse. Days later, they unearthed him, bearing him to a proper grave. The young boy, who is my father, would never forget the smell. Meanwhile, the occupiers urged the living bodies to move off the land. Trucks offered free rides to Jordan, where over 350,000 new refugees had arrived in the Nexa's aftermath. Hurriya sent word to Musa, Khalas, this is no place for our sons. She put her name on another list. Leaving, she was asked to sign a set of papers she couldn't read. For a signature, they inked her thumb, and she pressed where they asked her to. Later, this document would be used as evidence she had forfeit her right to return. But returning for now was far from mind. Ahead of her, the road would take months. Her boys climbed into the trunk, bent to give her their hands. They pulled away, their backs to the sea, the date palms, their 2 rooms in the sand. Hurriya left her daughter's grave and the remains of their cat, Hamdan. A cat she rescued from bullying boys, arriving as a blur of black fur, sprinting like Ziad for her lap. Did she have space to miss him too? Did her goodbyes form a rank in descending order of their ache? Does a body carry such separations as weight or empty space? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sara. Wow, what a question to end on. Also, there are things a body does not unlearn. I'll be sitting with that for a long time, so thank you. All right, our second author is Erika J. Simpson, a Southern girl living in Denver, Colorado with her partner and their black cat. She holds an MFA in creative writing from the University of Kentucky and is the recipient of their 2021 MFA award in nonfiction. Her essay, If You Ever Find Yourself, was published in Roxane Gay's The Audacity newsletter and featured in Best American Essays 2022, edited by Alexander Chi. This Is Your Mother is her debut memoir. She also writes fiction for the page and the screen. The floor is yours, Erika.
Hello. Thank you for having me. This is such an honor to be featured with such diverse people and with such beautiful words and stories. And a lot of times as a Black American, it feels like your story isn't as important. So it feels really great to be here and to share my mother's story, who she was a Gemini, I always have to mention, and she had cancer, recurring cancer, like my whole childhood. And so I'm going to read a passage from when I was in high school, and she tells me that she has it again. And it is going to be sad, but it's also humorous because that's how we deal with things. To survive, you have to laugh. Okay. In the middle of my junior year, Mama called me into her room, set me on the edge of the bed, and pulled a pamphlet from her bedside table, a trifold, just like her business brochures. The one she held was titled, What to Do Next, and decorated with pink ribbons. Beneath the title, bald women smiled wide and clutched onto each other. Mama spoke gently. The cancer is back. She paused, allowing me time to process. I wasn't sure what to say. It was happening again, the recurring nightmare we were trapped inside, sickness startling us awake every time we dared to rest. They say I could live up to 5 more years, but I know my God, and I think I have a lot more time left in me. Mama winked, like the cancer was in the room with us and we were sharing an inside joke. I tried to comprehend. Do you have to take chemo again? My eyes were trained on the happy bald women in the pamphlet, Mrs. Cleans. I wondered if they were still alive. I'm going to avoid it as long as possible so mommy doesn't get weak. I got big goals for my business. 5 years. She'd beaten it before. Was she strong enough to do it again? Maybe it was more about accomplishing her goals while she was still here. I could already tell from her tone that she was going to use everything she had, not to heal, but to hustle, which meant I had to do the same. I needed to become somebody before time ran out. What if the only way forward was on me? How could I give us both a future? A perk of being the baby girl was that I got to learn from both Mama and Samantha, take what worked and leave the rest. Samantha, my older sister, had written verse 3-1 on education all the way up north. I respected it, but it wasn't my style. Education was too slow and steady wins the race for me. I needed big coin if I was going to save me and Mama from the clutches of check to check living. Mama had a plethora of licenses and degrees, and it hadn't protected us from anything. But I had something simmering for a while now. Family lore said that when I was only a few months old, Grandma Jamie dreamed she saw me on television, her grandbaby performing for an audience. Too bad she didn't see anything about her son not raising me, but she dropped a prophecy at least. My audition for local television in fourth grade may not have gone anywhere, but the dream never left my veins. There was a year and a half left of high school, 5 alleged years left of Mama. Logically speaking, I needed to get to Hollywood. I just had to focus on the vision. If life was a stage, whatever was supposed to happen could start right here in the classroom. In Decatur, Georgia, high school swayed like Motown. Judging from the old bullet hole lodged in one of the front windows of Towers High School, you'd think our boys were gangbanging, but no. Really, they were rapping. Any one of them could be the next Fabo, T.I., Little John and the East Side Boys. At lunch, you'd hear fists beating and against tabletops, a mouth tit-tit-titting, and then somebody would start freestyling about being fresh to death and running the city. Soldier Boy was our age, and he had popped from cranking his dance all over YouTube. A couple guys from our school got a hit on the radio called Juke Ya Boy. It seemed like the only way to make it onward and upward was entertainment. Not to be outdone, the girls were singing soulful in the bathroom stalls between classes. Their crew would whoop and shout and encourage each other to audition for American Idol. A girl from Towers made it past the first round but then got cut, though you'd have sworn she had an album out from our reaction. In 10th grade, I formed a clique. Me, Amber, Courtney, Crystal, and Uche. We came to call ourselves Les Entourage, and we hung tight in all our AP classes, laughing nonstop. A girl sat in one of our unofficial assigned seats once, and we got so irritated that we wrote a diss track on her, rapping her name backwards and calling her a hoe. We realized we had potential, and we made Les Entourage a rap group. We performed our debut track, Eat Me Out, in the gymnasium during our lunch period. Eat me out, eat me out, eat me out. Both times we were met with jeers from the boys who only wanted to hear other boys rap about getting their dick sucked. Not to be discouraged, Crystal and I used the studio in her basement at home. The girls from Crime Mob had recorded a track with her stepfather in the same room. It took us a whole Saturday afternoon to get it perfect. And then we played it for her mother, stepfather, and her sisters that night. We smiled with anticipation, praying they'd say we had what it took to take the radio, become local legends, get signed, and end up holding microphones on 106 and Park with Free and AJ. Instead, they balked at our 15-year-old asses begging for head on the track, and her mother yanked the CD from the boombox and snapped it in half. Rap had been a detour. Girl groups weren't the way. Beyonce had just left Destiny's Child after all. It was time for me to break out. Sports was an option, but it worked better for the football boys. My friend Ellen had already been the girl who played football on the boys' team, so that niche was taken. Volleyball had cute uniforms, but I was only good at serving. I tried my hand at soccer, playing some decent defense, but I wasn't full ride to college good at all. I tore my ACL before the season was out. Inspired by my pages of fan fiction, I gave writing a try, circulating a novella I'd written in a spiral notebook titled Zane, with a picture of the rapper Zane glued on top, and starring a character named Zane, who was super smart and trying to get out of the ghetto, but gets shot and killed before he can make it. Riveting stuff. But after a few passes around school, I wasn't sure what to do next. I wanted to occupy a space that no one had been inside. Drama class presented itself as an entry point to Hollywood in my eyes. None of the teenagers around me were interested in being scrutinized on stage. There was plenty of space for me to shine. I enrolled. It was mostly taken as a sleeper course, taught by a round man named Mr. Shiro, who would whack a playbook against the desk when he caught people sleeping, then tell them to read a part. Some of these kids stumbled over every word when they were called on, but I loved to read out loud. My classmates leaned forward as I brought characters to life, making clear the world of the play as I read it. When my paragraph of text was done, my cheeks were blush hot. I could be the next Oprah. I played her in the skits in class, shouting for my classmates to check under their chairs. You get detention! You get detention! And I left them belly laughing. Unlike the other kids in school, I had real motivation. Mama held a ticking clock in her hands, and I was racing against it. With Mr. Chiro's help, I got the abandoned drama club reopened, and we put on a production of A Christmas Carol. I remember nothing about the play except my big scene as Scrooge's girlfriend, getting to wear a dress and act different from myself. My reputation as the next Raven Simone was loading. So far, Mama was doing better than she had during the cancer that took her breast. She needed daily pills and personal prayer, and her doctor still suggested chemo, but she didn't want it because she needed to work as much as possible. She was teaching DUI now, and the classes were sporadic, which meant sporadic rent payments. If we didn't answer the phone, the landlord would come in person. We'd see his bald head through the window and still not answer. Sometimes he'd walk through the yard into the back door and peer in through the blinds to see if we were home. We'd hide upstairs. Mama would call him later and try to work something out. We needed her business to pop now more than ever. We couldn't be poor and sick. That was 1998. A low like that was hard to come back from. Thank you.
Erika, thank you so much for making us laugh and smile, but also giving us the hard truths of life. Your story is so important and beautiful. And also, shout out to 106 in Park. Those were the days. Absolutely. So, thank you for that, Erika. All
Thank you.
right. Next up is Julian Brave NoiseCat, a writer, Oscar-nominated filmmaker, champion powwow dancer, and student of Salish art and history. His writing has appeared in dozens of publications, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the New Yorker. NoiseCat has been recognized with numerous awards, including the 2022 American Mosaic Journalism Prize and many national Native Media Awards. He was a finalist for the Livingston Award and multiple Canadian National Magazine Awards, and was named in the Time 100 Next List. Yes, Next List in 2021. His first documentary, Sugarcane, was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Documentary. NoiseCat is a proud member of the Cannon Lake Band and descendant of the Leewat Nation of Mount Currie. We Survive the Night is his first book. Welcome, Julian.
I've given away all of my advanced reader copies and I'm on the road, so I'm reading from a PDF. Super apologies for that. I know it's not the most cool way to do a reading, but bear with me here. This is from a section of the book called In the Beginning, which comes in the beginning. Okay, here goes. The noise came from behind the mission. It sounded like a cat. I've imagined it countless times. At about 11:30, the night watchman pulled his car around back of St. Joseph's Mission, one of the Indian residential schools in British Columbia, Canada, where my family was sent to unlearn our Indian ways. The 4-story building was all white and right angles, unadorned save for a big cross looming over the entrance and blue-green trim that, from a distance, made the campus look like a hunk of moldy cheese plopped in the middle of the valley. In my mind's eye, his carburetor is coughing, the crickets are singing, and there's that tiny, eerie cry. When he killed the engine and stepped out from behind his insect-speckled windshield, the night watchman could hear it too. It was coming from the service wing, a single-story brick annex at the back of the mission. The baby's scream climbed the lone smokestack looming out of that annex and crawled across the school grounds. It was primal, the sound of birth meeting death. The night watchman flicked on his flashlight. Its beam reflected off his browline eyeglasses. Antonius Cornelius Stoop went by Tony. He wore his brown hair in one of those short-cropped everyman cuts. And he was an everyman. A Dutchman who spoke broken English, Tony immigrated to Canada from the old country. At night, he walked the grounds of St. Joseph's, a ring of keys jingling on his hip and a flashlight in his hand. It was his job to make sure the Indian kids weren't up to any Indian mischief, like stealing food or running away. He also kept an eye on the mission's prized and profitable herd of Herefords. Undoubtedly, he saw and heard many things in his many nights at St. Joseph's, where he worked for more than 30 years until the school was shuttered in 1981. But he said little and kept to himself. Earlier that evening, Tony attended a meeting of the Knights of Columbus, a Catholic fraternal organization in Williams Lake. To reach the town of Williams Lake from St. Joseph's Mission, about 12 miles, he took Mission Road north to the Caribou Highway. He turned left, following the road west as it winds above the shores of Williams Lake into the Canadian cowtown of that same name. A 1964 photograph of the Knights of Columbus's Clergy Night published in the Williams Lake Tribune, captures the portraits of 7 priests, all seated. The one farthest to the right, Brother Dowdy, was convicted on numerous counts of sexual abuse. Another, Father O'Connor, dead center, was a principal at St. Joseph's who rose to the rank of bishop. Convicted of rape and indecent assault in 1996, he was acquitted of the assault on appeal. A new trial was called for the rape, but after O'Connor apologized to his alleged victims, that trial did not move forward. In 2021, the Williams Lake First Nation opened an investigation into missing students at St. Joseph's Mission. The First Nations investigators found that under O'Connor and other principals at St. Joseph's, babies conceived by students and nuns, including some fathered by priests, were aborted or adopted out. Witnesses, as well as records in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police Archives, attested to something even darker: newborn babies cast into the incinerator to be burned with the garbage. Sometimes I wonder what Tony knew about these men and what happened at their school after dark. It's hard to imagine he spent all those years walking the mission grounds at night without hearing or seeing some of the things that students, prosecutors, juries, and even abusers themselves later acknowledged. But he did tell this story to the Williams Lake Tribune, where, 7 decades later, investigators found the article and shared it with me. Because that night, the night of August 16, 1959, Tony followed that whale, flashlight in hand. Sound and light led him inside the service wing to a garbage burner about the size of an office desk, where trash from the mission was turned to ash. He opened it, casting rays of light onto rubbish and soot. Somewhere near the top of the pile was an ice cream carton, repurposed as a makeshift wastebasket and discarded no more than 20 minutes before. Within was a newborn. The authorities called him Baby X, and he was my father.
Thank you so much, Julian. Absolutely beautiful. The sound of birth meeting death. I believe Lorena also called that out in the audience. Yeah, really lovely. All right, let's move on. I don't want to, but let's do it. Our 4th reader this evening is Amanda Hess. Amanda is a critic at large for the New York Times. She writes about internet and pop culture for the art section and contributes regularly to the New York Times Magazine. Hess has worked as an internet columnist for Slate Magazine, an editor at Good Magazine, and an arts and nightlife columnist at the Washington City paper. She has also written for such publications as ESPN The Magazine, Wired, and Pacific Standard, where her feature on the online harassment of women won a National Magazine Award for Public Interest. Take it away, Amanda.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here in conversation with all of you. If you hear children screaming in the background, I'm sorry. If I tell them to be quiet, they will just get louder. My book is about how technology affects our relationships with our kids before they're even born. And for me, that meant reckoning with messages that it was sending me about normalcy and disability, what constitutes a good mother and a healthy child. And I'm going to read from the introduction. I did not know that anything was unusual until I was 7 months pregnant. This week, your baby can cry, my pregnancy app said. Yes, in the uterus. I waited in the lobby of the prenatal imaging center, stroking my phone until I depleted its stock of inane facts. My baby cried inside my body for the same reasons that it would cry outside of my body. Like if you hear a loud noise or they're bothered by something, the app said. Just as you might be starting to prepare for their arrival, they're constantly preparing for life in the outside world. The app handed me a drawing of a frowning baby, a teardrop slipping down its cheek. Inside the exam room, the technician wore a stumpy ponytail and an annoyed expression. I wore a sheet of paper with armholes. She dimmed the lights and stood astride her mysterious station. I could see plastic scepters and orbs, a basket of serums, a keyboard with hieroglyphic markings. The technician unsheathed her wand. She slathered cold gel on my skin and worked her probe into the hard rind of my stomach. I assumed various poses at her command, bobbing and craning my neck to keep one eye focused on my young. On the screen, static rained on little ribs and fists. As the technician worked, she offered selections from her trove of professional small talk. Do you know the sex? Have you picked a name? I wanted to slice her out of the scene, to watch my baby with silent focus, but I also wanted to seem normal and good. I told her the baby was a boy without a name. Then she said, he's sticking his tongue out. So I said, aw. The technician fussed with the machine. She twisted its dials and clacked at its keys and then left the room. The gel grew thick on my stomach. I missed my phone. I wondered if there were any new work emails in there. When the technician returned, she ordered more poses, captured more shots. I had reported to the doctor's office for a routine scan, but as in a dream, the routine kept repeating. We passed the plausible length of a standard procedure, then lapped it. Again, the technician left the room and returned. The doctor is busy with another patient, she said. That's why it's taking so long. I might as well get some more photos while we wait. On her live stream of my body, she conjured a craggy amber landscape, a cave of mineral spires. I asked her what it was. An ear, she said. Weird, I said. My bright tone hung awkwardly in the darkened air. The technician's store of conversation was picked clean. She now communicated in the perfunctory style of a deposition, answering only when strictly necessary. I searched her glassy eyes for clues. Were they always fixed so intensely on the screen? Dread pooled in my brain and danced in liquid shapes. Stupid, stupid. The doctor was not with another patient, and the technician was not taking more pictures for fun. I watched her map my baby's ear for secret reasons. When she directed me to lie on my side, I gratefully accepted. I turned my back to her and the monitor. I turned my back on my baby. Later, I would read a report of the ultrasound and learn that this phase of the examination had lasted for 1 hour. For an hour, I lay on the table, playing dead. I imagined that if I could stay completely still, the skeletal hand of complication might pass me by. It would crack the door to the next ultrasound room and tap on some other pregnant body. The moment would slink away like so many of the anxious thoughts that had visited me during my pregnancy. I was always anticipating the worst, imagining the plane dropping from the sky, the shooter reaching the office door. Soon the doctor would arrive smiling, apologizing for the delay. The technician would hand me a roll of keepsake photos. I would escape past the reception desk and rise through the elevator into the sun. Why did I say that? Weird. I said it out loud and welcomed the complication into the room. I upset the tacit rules of the procedure. The technician takes the photos, the doctor interprets them. I smile through my mask. Alone with the technician, I could imagine my baby as a nymph exploring the womb. Only when the doctor arrived did he become a specimen pinned behind the window of my skin. If I had said nothing, I still would have known that my pregnancy had been recategorized as a special medical case. But I could have pretended for a few more minutes that it had not. The errors I made during my pregnancy knocked at the door of my mind. I drank a glass and a half of wine on Mark's birthday before I knew I was pregnant. I swallowed a tablet of Ativan for acute anxiety after I knew. I took a long hot bath that crinkled my fingertips. I got sick with a fever and fell asleep without thinking about it. I waited until I was almost 35 years old to get pregnant. I wanted to solve the question of myself before bringing another person into the world, but the answer had not come. Now my pregnancy was, in the language of obstetrics, geriatric. For 7 months, we'd all acted like a baby was going to come out of my body like a rabbit yanked from a hat. The same body that ordered mozzarella sticks from the late night menu and stared into a computer like it had a soul. the body that had, just a few years prior, snorted a key of cocaine supplied by the party bus driver hired to transport it to medieval times. This body was now working very seriously to generate a new human. I had posed the body for Instagram, clutching my bump with two hands as if it might bounce away. I had bought a noise machine with the womb setting and thrown away the box. Now I lay on the table as the doctor stood in his chamber, rewinding the tape of my life. My phone sat on an empty chair 6 feet away. Smothered beneath my smug maternity dress, it blinked silently with text messages from Mark. If I had the phone, I could hold it close to the exam table and Google my way out. I could pour my fears into its portal and process them into answers. I could consult the pregnant women who came before me, dust off their old message board posts, and read of long ago ultrasounds that found weird ears and stuck out tongues. They had dropped their babies' fates into the internet like coins into a fountain, and I would scrounge through them all, looking for the lucky penny. For the woman who returned to say, "It turned out to be nothing. Trick of light." It was ludicrous, but in my panic, it felt incontrovertible. If I searched it smart and fast enough, the internet would save us. I had constructed my life through its screens and mapped the world along its circuits. Now I would make a second life there too. As I write this, 4 years later, I see my hour on the table as the moment that my relationship with technology turned, its shadows shifting around me. I reached for a sense of control and gripped tightly to my phone. It would not give me the answers I was looking for, but it would feed me wrong answers from its endless supply. It would serve me facts and conspiracies, gadgets and idols, judgments and tips. The baby tapped at my stomach. I rubbed my hand against it, returning the signal. The technician handed me a spray of paper towels and left me alone in the room. I heaved myself up and faced the exit. My stomach hung over the table's edge, waiting for the door to open.
Thank you, Amanda. That was so good. I love your tone on the page. Thank you for that. All right, we're going to carry on here. Everyone is just so lovely and distinct and wonderful, and I love it all together. That's the best part, all of it together, and separately too. We love that as well. Last but certainly not least is Samina Najmi. Samina teaches multi-ethnic U.S. literatures at California State University, Fresno. Her personal essays have been published widely, including in World Literature Today. Among the honors she's proud to claim, Penguin Random House's site Signature lists Triptych, one of her essays, as an example of the possibilities of the triptych form. Roxane Gay selected Greenford's Gift for publication in the Rumpus, and the essay remained on the website of a high school in Greenford, UK for 3 years. Abdul won Map Literary's Creative Nonfiction Prize, and Trinita was nominated for Pushcart by Under the Sun. Daughter of multi-generational displacements, Samina grew up in Pakistan and England, spent 18 years in Massachusetts, and, since 2006, calls Fresno, California home. Here she has watched with wonder her 2 children, her many students, and her citrus grow. Welcome, Samina.
Thank you so much. And thank you for putting this event together, for all the work that has gone into it, India. It's been a real pleasure. Congratulations to my fellow writers, and thank you everybody who has turned out at who knows what hour of the day in different time zones. Really appreciate your being here. So I am going to read an excerpt from Triptych, yeah, this was one I could manage within the 5 minutes. So here it is. One hot and sticky day in Pakistan's coastal city of Karachi, the girls of the Cambridge section at St. Joseph's are filing back into their classrooms after recess. Exhausted from the Herculean endeavor to push through the mob of girls outside Abdullah's or Mrs. Velo's snack bars, clamoring for chili chips, ice cream soda, or milk toffees, we collapse on the wooden benches of our 8th grade classroom, envying those whose seats are directly beneath the ceiling fans. Our 40-odd pairs of hands reach for water bottles, even if the water in them is already tepid. The air circulated by the ceiling fans is much too warm, but in time it will work its magic. Our uniforms will unglue from our backs, the semicircle of sweat beneath our short sleeves will fade, and the rivers edging our temples and hairlines will begin to evaporate. It's time for Senior Miss Fikri's geography class. Through the haze of humidity and the pungent odor emanating from our semicircled sleeves, an odor whipped around the room by the ceiling fans, we command our minds to grasp how high and low pressure systems develop in the atmosphere. Suddenly, a sparrow swoops in through the open door, sending the girls aflutter. What on earth is the little bird doing here among us? How disruptive, how foolish. Was it tempted indoors by the relative cool of our high colonial ceilings? Or empowered or overpowered by a freak exploratory impulse? Doesn't it know that some risks are not worth taking? Some curiosities and yearnings best buried within us? Within seconds, the sparrow has realized its mistake. But unable to see its way out, despite multiple possibilities of escape, it becomes a winged frenzy. It darts from one end of the classroom to the other in blinding flashes, to the gasps of the girls who duck their heads, cover their ears, shut their eyes. Nobody wants to witness this degree of desperation. We all know it doesn't have to be this way, but none of us knows what to do about it, not even Miss Fikri. And in any case, it all happens so fast. Next thing we know, the intruding bird, so small, so afraid, so out of place, has fluttered straight into a ceiling fan and sliced itself between the blades that continue in their own circular frenzy. Down comes the sparrow, a bloodied pulp on the classroom floor. It lies as still now as it had pulsated with frantic life a moment before. An ounce of flesh and feathers at our feet. I wonder now why we hadn't all jumped to switch the fans off the moment the sparrow flew in among us. We might have saved its life. Could our own physical comfort have made us indifferent to the threat it faced? Perhaps the spectacle of the bird's vulnerability simply paralyzed us. Or did the danger fail to register because we failed to imagine it? I think about the sparrow's flight and fall, its impetuous, audacious venture into our world. I wonder if it had a moment's regret. Decades later, I can hear the desperate flapping of its fragile wings, but I have no memory of its cry. Thank you.
Thank you, Samina. I remember that sparrow so well. I'll never forget this essay. So beautiful. Thank you. Brilliant, all of you. And thank you all for creating such a meaningful chorus of voices for us to listen to and learn from. Now, as I have all the authors join me back on screen, we are going to head into the Q&A portion. And as a reminder for our audience, if anyone has a question for one or all of our authors, please feel free to share it in the chat, and I will try my absolute best to incorporate as many of your questions as possible. Looking at the clock right now. Okay, great. I'm going to get us started with one question. I'm just going to delve straight in. I really love to talk craft among writers. So on a craft level, since we're talking about the genre of creative nonfiction, how did you all balance research and getting historical and familial facts as accurate as possible with also following your personal emotional truths and the stories underpinning all of your books? What was that balance like?
Well, I can start if you'd like. For me, the research is in every essay, almost every essay. The research is a welcome break from some of the emotional intensity, of the pieces. So it's a memoir and essays, Sing Me a Circle. Um, so it feels of a piece with it. It's integrated. It's the way I understand the not just the events in my life, but also patterns in lives beyond mine. And there's a great comfort in that.
I'll answer. For me, my mother was born in 1956 in North Carolina, and she's the sixth child of 10. And so, in writing about her, I first felt like I need to talk to all of my aunts and uncles, and I need to know like the truth, the truth. And then you kind of realize the truth is within you. I think it's your own personal perspective. That's what makes your story and your vulnerabilities so honest. I know for me, it's featured in the book, but a big research for me was asking my Aunt Maddie if while I lived with her, did she actually withhold letters that my mother sent me from jail? Because I was 8 and my mother would tell me everything. And that was one question that I did want to get the truth on. And my Aunt Maddie told me, yes, I did hold the letters. And I was like, oh, but she was like, you didn't need to know that level of truth at that time. And so that was something that I had to forgive her and then also like just keep writing. Or there was other truths about my mother that I had to come to understand and grapple with. But I think ultimately I had to just research my own honesty. Do you know what I mean? Like my own inner truth and not try to collect everyone else's and piece together my truth from theirs if we're researching a personal story.
I can go. I love that, Erika and Samina. I relate to a lot of what you're saying. My book, I didn't really introduce it. I apologize if I'm freezing up. I didn't really introduce it, but it's a braided memoir that includes a personal story, but also all of these historical scenes like the one I read. I'm trained as a journalist, and one thing that I learned in journalism school is you should report until you start getting the repeat answers. That's how you know you've kind of covered your bases. It's like, okay, I have a lay of the land. So in a way, I did that with family research as well as historical research. I got to the point where I was getting repeat family stories and they were corroborating each other. But then there was also so many voids in the archive. I think, especially if you're writing the story of marginalized people or people whose history has been deliberately erased, there's a unique challenge to that. Saidiya Hartman has a concept called critical fabulation, where she talks about collaborating with the archive and imagining, like it's an educated imagination into those silences, not a reckless one, but one which, trusts research and also trusts, in my case, ancestral instinct. There were just moments where I felt permission to like take that extra step into the impossible to verify, but like deeply felt truth. And I also write in the book about how my body was almost telling stories, and it was like a compass sometimes. The way my body was reacting, it was pointing me towards certain things that I eventually came to face and learned about much later, actually, after some of the writing. So those are some of the thoughts I have.
I had the experience that was perhaps unique on this panel of making a film and a book at the same time. And the thing about a verite documentary, an observational documentary that might be a little bit different from writing is, in writing you can recreate a scene that you weren't present for. You can interview people, you can do research, reporting, et cetera, and you can recreate people and places that you maybe have never been and maybe you've never met. And in at least verite documentary, observational style documentary, you have to actually be present for things in order to film them. And that demanded that I was we shot over 1,000 hours when we made Sugarcane. And I was on the ground in Williams Lake, which is the region that my family comes from, for over 100 days. So it required me the research and reporting part of that, which dovetailed with the book in various ways, required me to be present in the life of my family and community in a way that I had not been before. Part of what I write about in my book is that I grew up over 1,000 miles away in Oakland, California. And I think that led me to ask questions like, in the wake of a cultural genocide, what does it mean to live a native way of life? What does it mean to tell stories in an indigenous way that helps bring back traditions that were nearly killed off by these schools? I chose to move in with my dad, a guy who left me when I was 6 years old, and I lived with him for 2 years while I wrote this book. And I think that in a certain way, that is one of actually the things that I've come to believe nonfiction has up on fiction. One of the things that's really beautiful about nonfiction is it's about how we choose to live our life and how we see the world. And, there's a lot of things that you could say about the power of fiction and novels, like in fiction and novels, you can just write the scene in whatever way is the best artistic way to write the scene. In fiction film, you can like light it and shoot it in all the ways that you think is going to be perfect. But we get to actually live the stories that we write about often. And I think that is a really beautiful, powerful thing. And I think that if you follow that idea all the way through in your work, I think that it can have profound impacts, not just on your work, but on how you choose to live your life. Hence why I'm at my auntie's office today to do this, to do this Q&A.
My book is about my relationship with information, and once I figured that out, it became possible to like integrate the research parts with the memoir parts of my book and to make the research and the uncovering of information part of my emotional journey.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you. Those are amazing answers. So let's go to an audience question. I think this goes into like the editing process as well, but did you end up writing the book you thought you were writing at the beginning of the process? And I'm just going to tag on to that and say what changed, what transformed, because I'm going to assume the book's transformed. So what was that process like, beginning to end? What did you think going, and then what do you know now?
Mine was a slow cook process. So I was writing one essay at a time. And the book I thought I was writing was focused entirely on growing up in Pakistan under a military dictatorship. And then I thought that on the side, I was writing these essays about my life as a parent and a professor in Fresno, California. So it was Theo Nestor actually who helped me see that these two manuscripts actually belonged together, that they made sense in this way. So yes, of course, Pakistan is still very much in Singmia's circle, but there's an interaction between these two places, and then some other places where I've lived, that is a lot more holistic and a lot more true to who I am, because of course, all those places live in me, right?
My answer is what came to me quickly, so I'll jump in because it is very much a part of what I think about when I think about the book. I mentioned being a journalist. I thought I would write a series of essays. I mean, I was in denial about writing a book for a long time. I didn't feel like I had the right. Then I thought I would do a nice, neat book of essays because I love that form. So all love to that form. But the book was very unruly and insisted on continuing to teach me, I guess, my assumptions about myself, about the world, about my ability. The book is about recovery from addiction, from eating disorder, among many other things, including intergenerational trauma. These are not things that lend themselves to linear narratives. So I think I was continually humbled by the book. It kept sprawling. It kept introducing me to new ways to think about story. It became more and more porous, more and more multivocal. And I realized after a time that I was learning to write the book. I was sort of like learning the DNA of this project. And it took all of its cues really from Palestinian traditions and other, indigenous traditions, Black traditions, radical traditions of many sorts that privilege oral storytelling, that privilege emotional truth, that listen to stories that come from the earth up, like these these more horizontal ways of understanding the world, and also very fragmented, very broken, especially at the beginning, because you meet me and I'm institutionalized for mental illness. So this is a very fragmented place. And so giving myself the permission to break form over and over again, it was the only way the book wanted to be written, and I eventually surrendered. And I'll just say, like, many brilliant, we all have so many lineages we can look to, and people have written about all of these methods of storytelling. And I think I just had to learn to take my authority from the people I already come from versus like the people I learned to read and mold myself after in my Western education. So yeah, it was very humbling, surprising, and being multilingual was also something I had to risk. So there's a whole story about how that interacted with the process of getting published. That's another story. But I'm just really grateful from all I learned. And to what Julian said, I completely changed the way I live through the process of writing this book. And I could not be more grateful to have been the one that got to experience this project. I'm just really grateful.
Yeah, I'd like to follow that just because it resonates a lot with what I was going to say. You know, the thing that is kind of, I guess, different or literarily ambitious about We Survived the Night is that it's written in the tradition, the style, the structure of a coyote story, which I'll explain very briefly. So a coyote story is a kind of traditional trickster narrative from my own people's culture. We account for the creation of the world and the way things are through a figure and the stories about him called Coyote, who was sent to the earth by the creator to set things in order. But while he did a lot of good, he was a trickster and he messed a lot of stuff up, hence why things are the way they are. We also consider him to be like one of our first ancestors. So he's kind of our explanation of why we are the way we are. And this tradition has also, I should say, almost entirely died out. I've only heard one member of my family ever tell a coyote story out loud. And it was like one of my uncles who was one of my grandfather's like many stray children. You can read this in the book, but my grandfather had at least 19 kids I could name. And he's gone now. My uncle. So this is very much, a very nearly wiped out tradition that I should also say existed all the way from Central America to Western Canada. People told coyote stories over a vast geography. This is an enormous body of the humanities in a sense. And as I was living with my dad and learning more about his kind of crazy stories, I was reading these old ethnographies that had some of our people's old coyote stories in them. And the more that I was like reading and then hanging out with my old man and then reading and hanging out with my old man, I kind of realized like, oh my God, like my dad is the trickster. Like the coyote stories are really just a way. One of the purposes of them was so that we could understand like our crazy dads and uncles and grandfathers and all that sort of stuff. I mean, they had multiple purposes, but this was one of them. And they also were considered nonfiction. I mean, they are nonfiction. And so I was really taken by this idea in the middle of the hanging out and writing of what would it be to let the coyote stories live as nonfiction again? And would it be possible to do narrative nonfiction in the form of a coyote story? And eventually that idea ended up sort of taking over in a way, transforming the whole shape-shifting, maybe is the right way to put that, the whole book. And I think sometimes part of the power of one of the beautiful things about writing, right, is that like the material itself will eventually tell you what form it wants to take, and that is a process that takes like sometimes years.
I'd love to jump in. I love hearing the way things are formed and how we all have to create our own um, vision of how to format a story. I love that Samina got to keep some essays and then did a merging. And then I feel like Seta, where I was trying to I'm like, this is going to be a perfect, precise book of essays. And it's going to be, and it's going to be like, I'll write about like all the white boys I slept with, and I'll write about, and then like my mom will be in there. And then like I realized like, oh girl, you've never been to therapy for anything that happened to you, for the 5 times your mom had cancer, for being homeless. You've never been to therapy. And so for me, in the same way, Julian is like, let me actually tap into like how I view the world and how my family would structure this. And like, so my mother's hyper religious. So I actually structured it by bringing in biblical stuff, like making her the God and quoting things that she said. And then I also, because I haven't been to therapy, television is a lot of my therapy. So I structured it where like I break into TV at times. Like when I have to go visit my mother in hospice, we get a commercial break because I can't handle that. So I'm like, I don't think my reader could emotionally handle it. And I love like just breaking format, as Sarah was saying. It's like I don't have to write like these old white men. I can write like me, and it can be infused with my story and how I think. Like when I'm freaking out, suddenly it's like, what's Mulder and Scully doing? I want to believe. I want to believe my mother will live. Like that's how I see the world, and so that's how I wrote it. And so I'm actually thankful that I did break away from the essays because I actually ended up tapping into like something much more personal to me and not doing essays. And mine is also braided as well, the last 6 months of my mother's life. And then my life from 98 until 2013, having to deal with that as a child. So, yeah, definitely did not expect that. I thought it was going to be something more funny and far away from me. And then I got very close in an uncomfortable way.
Lovely. Did you want to say anything, Amanda, or no?
I'm like, come talk, Amanda.
My book has sort of ended up kind of how I imagined that it would. I mean, it took a long time to get there, but before I knew that it was going to be about pregnancy and birth and parenting, like I knew that I wanted the internet to kind of function like a character in the book. And that was really the thing that stayed true through the whole thing.
Yeah. I love that. I love that it stayed the way that you thought it would, but transformed in smaller ways. I love this conversation. I love we're taking this. I'm also respectful of people's time, so I'm going to give us one final question before we round everything up. Um, and I think this is a really interesting question because it's about readership, like who our readers are and things like that. And I've never heard this question before, so I'm going to volley it to you, and I can't take credit for it. Who is the reader it's been most gratifying to share your finished book with?
My dad, maybe for obvious reasons.
I can't wait to read more about his story. I'm gonna say my sister. She didn't read a second of it while I was writing it. And like once she read it, I was like that gif of Oprah being held from the back. She's like and it meant everything. The book is dedicated to her. It meant everything to represent our mother and our story and even her correctly and have her be like, you did it. She would be proud. Like, uh.
So I'm trained as a scholar, and during my first sabbatical, I was at this crossroads. I had to decide whether I was going to proceed with the scholarly project I had proposed for the sabbatical, or do this memoir that ended up being in a different form, but still a memoir and essays. And I went with the latter. With this thought in mind that I would like to have the memoir come out in my parents' lifetimes. So that didn't happen with my father, but my mother did get to read it, and it's been very gratifying to hear her comments, which are obviously she knows all the cast of characters here, right, or most of them, but her comments are all about the writing, what she likes, what I might have done differently. you know? So that has been very gratifying.
I think for me it's strangers, like just hearing from people who I never would have met otherwise, and being able to have this conversation with them like through the book is amazing. I remember when I was writing it, I was always like Googling like how to write a book to like get just like a shot of advice, and uh all of the like junk websites with writing advice were like you should write to a specific person who you imagine reading the book, and I was like, well, I can't do that because I can't imagine anyone reading this. So just the idea that, strangers have read the book is like incredibly gratifying.
Um, I would have to say there's a couple I'll cheat, but my father, he told me, well, he told my friend who told me that he thinks that my grandmother can rest, which was an unbelievable thing to hear and not what I would ever expect to be able to accomplish. But inshallah, she's resting. My brother is expecting a little girl, so I hope that she will be able to like read the stories of her family that I've like worked 5 years of my life to like find for her, and she can have them, and we can have another generation of Palestinians that know where we come from. And then my family in Gaza, um, they have not been able to read the book because they're under siege, but they have internet sometimes and they know about it, and their names are written in the back of the book, and they're, in spite of everything, continue to tell me that they're proud and they feel seen. So you all got to see me almost cry, but that's my answer. And I hope they'll be free so soon for so many reasons, my book being least of all, but inshallah, we will all be free.
Thank you all. You have moved me in such a way. Yes, this is a very emotional, intellectual, craft-oriented, everything session, and I know that our audience feel the same. But I want to thank you all for sharing yourselves because that's what creative nonfiction gives us. It's like we have bits of you that we can walk away with, and that strengthens our collective humanity and our individual humanity. So thank you all for doing that for us today and reminding us that like we're all in this together. We all come from different places, but we're all the same at the end of the day. So thank you for that. And now I'm going to go into my proper outro, yeah? And I'm going to leave you guys alone. So it's been a real pleasure sharing space with you all this evening and listening to the five of you read and respond to all of our questions. On behalf of poets and writers, I want to extend our gratitude to Samina, Amanda, Julian, Erika, and Sada for joining us over Zoom and for adding your brilliant stories to the world with the publication of your debuts. We will drop once more in the group chat the link to our bookshop page, including all 5 titles and the ability to easily purchase them. If you don't want to buy them now, I don't know what to tell you. Like, that's it. Signed, sealed, delivered for me personally. We're also going to do a link to the online feature where you can listen to and read excerpts from their books, and a link to our membership page for those of you who would like to support our organization and become a member of the Poets and Writers community so we can continue our work of supporting and uplifting, well, poets and writers, just like you all. So let's give a round of applause for our Zoom audience as well for spending time with all of us this evening. Tonight's event has also been recorded, so a video of the readings and the Q&A will be available soon on our YouTube page as well as on our website in the coming days. This concludes the celebration of our 2025 new nonfiction authors. Thank you all for joining us. I'm wishing you much tenderness and peace. And until next time, thank you, thank you, thank you to the 5 of you, truly.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.